All right, I'll invite my guest on up, and with a spirit of curiosity and a readiness to listen well, let's jump in together.
Sweet. All right. Thanks for having me, everybody.
Well, why don't we just, yes, that's another element of that I'm thankful for is you and Karma coming down here to Southern Oregon. Is this your first time down here?
You know, we've drove through and that's it, man.
Yeah,
This
usually
is the
it's
first
kind of the
time stopping.
I-5 flyby, you know, so.
No, it's good though. This is great.
This
you guys have an in and out and we don't, so I mean, you're winning.
So why don't we just to kind of set the stage, we know your name because it's up there, but just tell us your name, tell us what you do, and how long you've been doing it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so Tre Giles, and like Jay said, my wife Karma right back here. And so I'm the pastor of Justice and Mercy at a church in Portland called Bridgetown. And let's see here, we moved to Portland January 1, 2021. And so we haven't lived there that long. And also, it's a very interesting time to move to Portland if you've been up that way in that time frame. So we can talk about that if you want to. But, you know, I've worked at Bridgetown not quite 3 years, but I'm pushing towards that end. And so I've had a couple of different roles there. I've run alpha courses, if you know what that might be, just like an evangelism, like meal type of thing. I've done some young adult things along with evangelism, and now overseeing our Justice and Mercy department.
So the pastor of Justice and Mercy, that's a new pastoral role for my imagination. I've never met anybody else with that title.
It's a fun one.
Well, help me understand what you do in that role, but also maybe how that role, if you know, how that role came to be a part of the Bridgetown's ministry team.
Yeah, so let me do a little bit of history first and then kind of fill in some color about where we're at. But, you know, Bridgetown used to be a part of its like mother church. And as that church really started to kind of grow, it was called West Side of Jesus Church. It started to really...
West Side of Jesus Church?
West Side A Jesus Church.
Jesus Church.
Yep.
Okay.
Now they're just called A Jesus Church, but beautiful, amazing people. But this campus really started to grow, and you know they're starting to do the multi kind of site thing. And John Mark Comer, a lot of people know him because of his writings and his teachings and everything. Started to have this really vibrant congregation in downtown Portland. Young adults exploded. Boom, Bridgetown's born. I'm bringing all that up though because before Bridgetown was really born, there was a really beautiful justice effort. And there wasn't necessarily someone on the church's staff who like oversaw just that. But there was a nonprofit that was kind of born that was hosted within the church, and they oversee a lot of different domestic and like international partnerships. So as everyone started to kind of split, a couple different campuses are built. Certain organizations almost went with a certain church, and it was like, okay, we have the finances to cover these ones, we have the finances to cover these ones, and that's kind of how it all got divvied up. And over time, those relationships have been maintained, but it's just almost been like an extra to someone's job a lot of the times. It's like I do this plus boom, 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 like a lot of church roles. And now in the past 2 years, we brought in someone. His name is JT Thomas, Jonathan Tremaine Thomas, and he's in Ferguson, Missouri, runs an organization called Civil Righteousness. And for a good over a year, almost 2, he came to Portland from Missouri 1 week out of every month. And he was pretty much helping to pioneer to build a justice department rather than our church just doing justice-oriented like activity. And so he would just fly in. He would meet with people all over the city. He would kind of get some of the bones set. And then I was the person who got to inherit the full-time role to oversee that job. And we then hired another person, a Justice and Mercy manager. So we went from 0 to a part-time to now 2 full-time people within the department. And we do probably too much right now. Like, if I'm really honest, I really think we need to trim some of the fat to be more effective. But just kind of like the 30,000-foot view, you know, we have communities that meet all over the city. Those are like what we call our small groups. We call them communities. And they're based off of the geography of Portland. So Portland's split up by a river and one street called Burnside. So wherever you live in the city, you meet up with those people. And each community group has a rhythm. And so for 2 weeks, you might be just talking about like, oh, what was the Sunday message? What is a practice that we would like to incorporate into our life to mature in the way of Jesus? One of the weeks in the month is like family night. You just got to laugh, kick it, make fun of each other. That's good for the family. And then the last part of that rhythm is to do like a justice expression. And so one of the biggest ways that we mobilize our people is through those community groups. They self-select either one of our partners that's officially partnered with Bridgetown or someone they've decided to build relational equity with, and they pursue proximity to them at least once a month. And so the goal is to not just serve once a month, but the aim is always, always, always kinship. And so how do we go past just showing up and serving the food or painting the house or doing this, that, the other, but how do we pursue kinship? You know, how do we actually make this feel like I know you, you know me, we're for each other? And so that's one of the biggest things, is just mobilizing our people to go be the hands and feet of Jesus in our city. And I think everyone should do that, regardless if your church has a department or not, right? But outside of that, we have a racial justice committee, which we could talk more about, but they're just asking a lot of questions about how do we feel oneness in our church. No matter what background you're from, how does anyone walk in here and feel like I can be at home here? It's not just for someone of a socioeconomic pattern or a certain ethnic background, but like, how do we all feel at home here? From the youth ministry to the Sunday teaching, like, how does all that kind of happen? We do a monthly feast. You know, we have a good amount of houseless population in our city, and we want to learn how to serve them, but also to get to know their names. So we send street greeters, is what we call them, to the highways and byways. They bring people in to this place, and we have tables like this with hosts. And people are sat there, and we come and we bring them food, host, get to know their names, their needs. A couple nonprofits that provide longer-term support are there if they choose to self-elect into that. We have like a first aid station for minor issues. A lot of them, honestly, just need to get referred to like in hospital because their leg's like falling off or something, and they just have learned to live with that. So that feast happens monthly. We have a good amount of domestic and international partners, and we lean on a lot of other organizations in our city and other churches and other networks to do this work, because justice is it's a huge work, and it's a slow work, and that I don't care how big or how fruitful your church is, like, you're not going to tackle, you know, the foster care system or the refugee crisis or houselessness or addiction, or how do you re-enter someone who was an AIC and is now a returning citizen from prison? Like, not one church can do all that. So we have a lot of partnerships.
What's
there's more,
AIC?
Yeah. So in AIC, in Oregon, that's the language that we would use for like someone who's incarcerated, currently serving within prison. So an adult in custody. And AIC is the language that we use, at least in Oregon. Mm-hmm. And then I think what they say when they're coming home is a returning citizen. Okay. Because they were trying to return to be an active participant in society.
With your community groups, what did you call them again? Communities?
Communities, yeah.
Communities?
Yeah.
So that's a church-wide thing, but then part of the community group's rhythm is to engage with some of the work that you oversee as part of their life as a community.
100%.
So the community groups are not necessarily your thing. But you're helping to manage some of the different ministries that the community groups are going to choose to engage with weeks 2 and 3 or 3 and 4 or something.
Yep, okay. Or even just 1 week a month. I think the best way to view it is like, if my department is running well, it very much so should not exist in a silo. It shouldn't be like now we're entering into justice activity. It should be overlapping with our small groups, overlapping with our Sundays, overlapping with our youth group. Like, we should be integrated into every single other expression of our church, rather than just like, okay, now I put on my justice hat to go try to be this thing, but how does this saturate the entire way that you pursue Jesus and each other in community? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you, under your supervision, I was on your website, and you listed some things that you kind of oversee, and quite a few of them I think would connect with Grants Pass and what the churches in Grants Pass are aware of and engage with. Things like Every Child, Foster Parents Night Out, Safe Families, a recovery ministry, pregnancy care ministry, ministry to the houseless. And some of those other areas are of engagement that you oversee, shepherd, are very different. You mentioned the Racial Justice Committee. On your website, there's a land acknowledgement, which I don't know if any churches in this room I don't know if we have that. That's a different thing to have. And then ministry to refugees.
Yep.
So tell us a bit about the kind of work that Bridgetown is doing in these spaces, what it looks like to follow Jesus in these ministries, and the Racial Justice Committee. You said we could talk more about that. You gave us a little synopsis.
Yeah.
But maybe go in a bit more about those. Those are areas that maybe we wouldn't be as familiar with.
That's great. Mm-hmm. Yep. So the Racial Justice Committee was born, man, it might be pushing 5 years ago now. And during 2020, when everyone wanted to have these types of conversations, for better or for worse, whatever your experience was, it kind of heightened. But we had a lot of our leaders of color in Bridgetown, and this predates me, who just were having meal conversations with leadership at the church, and just like, hey, like, we need to talk about some of these things, police brutality, like, as a black man, when I walk into Bridgetown, like, this doesn't feel like a place that's home to me at all. Like, you don't talk like me, you don't speak like me. Like, I feel like I need to have a certain, like, educational level to even fit in. Like, how do we talk about that? And so to break down the committee, we have different liaisons. And each liaison is pretty much to partner with each department of our church. And so for us, that would look like gatherings, AKA like Sunday services, spiritual formation, youth and young adult. There is kids and families. And so we have someone who has a burden for kids and families who also cares about what about kids and families who maybe are not of the majority culture? How do they feel at home here? And so our committee gets together, and each of those liaisons is talking to staff members from each of those departments and always trying to ask questions. Maybe something went a little awry and we did something pretty insensitive. It's like, hey, this happened. Were you at least aware? And how can we mitigate that moving forward? We've been working on something called like a tone guide that honestly won't be for like public distribution. It's just more so like when we're talking about someone who's incarcerated, this is how we talk about them. When we're talking about people that we consider marginalized, should that always come with a race associated with it? Or is it just, are we trying to talk about someone who's marginalized? You know what I mean? And so we're just trying to make sure that our leaders up front that have a microphone, there's more power in this weird little like stick, right, than I think we care to admit. And so we want to make sure that we're shaping what's coming out of their mouth to be dignifying for people, not damaging, hopefully. And then just like, how do we bring families of color together once in a while, just so they know they're not alone in a space where they can feel a little isolated sometimes. Bridgetown is it's getting diverse, but like we're still probably 75% a white church, and so it's easy at a pretty large church as a person of color or as a refugee or even just someone coming in from one of our programs like off of addiction and recovery or something to be like, oh dude, this is too much, I can't fit in here. And so that committee is meeting every month with staff involvement, and we're asking really broad questions, and sometimes that means a concrete project. But a lot of time it's just dialogue and awareness, and that goes a really long way. And I think even just people of color who come to our church, to know that we're having conversation constantly is enough. They're like, okay, you care to talk. You know what I mean? You care to at least be aware of everything that I might be experiencing. And that speaks volumes to them. So,
help reset for me. I mean, as Christians, we want to be interested in how our words are impacting our neighbors. We want to be interested in how we are coming across to the people, whether they are, quote unquote, in our tribe or in our building or not. So that's definitely part of being a sent people, being sent into the world to share about this good news that we've received. There's also forgot my train of thought, got interrupted.
It's gonna come back.
Yeah, it's gonna come back. Well, I was gonna string the segue right into my question, and it was the segue that got lost. Here's my question.
Okay.
Just reset for us. Connect your Racial Justice Committee, the work on the tone guide, the work on being mindful of the language that you're using when you're holding the powerful stick. Connect that to the mission of Bridgetown as a Jesus church, as a church, as a church of a Christian church in.
I love it.
Yeah. So connect that for us.
Yeah, this is fun. Okay, let's see if I can not butcher it.
I've set the stage. You can be clunky in your response.
No, this is so fun. Let's get it. Our mission at Bridgetown is to be with Jesus, to become like Jesus, and to do what Jesus did. And it's to see the kingdom of heaven breaking into Portland, right? Like, that's what we want. That's full stop. And so I think, why do we have something like a racial justice committee? And ultimately, if I was going to project 5 years from now, I don't think we'll even call it the racial justice committee. I think we'd probably call it the reconciliation committee. And racial justice would be in a large part of that work, but it's just a part of the ministry of reconciliation. And Scripture does say that we have been given the ministry of reconciliation. And so if I think about Jesus, who reconciles people, he ultimately held that authority and that power. Then what he is doing is Jesus is reconciling people back to God. And there's this vertical reality. So it doesn't matter your tongue, your tribe, your nation, your anything, what your sin is, whatever. Jesus, through his power on the cross and his resurrection, he can bring all people back into correct relationship with God. And now if you can bring people back into correct relationship with their Father, now the horizontal implications of coming back into correct relationship with each other, I think, can be a little bit more easily met. And maybe not easily, but met in a way that is just covered in mercy and grace and forgiveness and kindness and goodness and all those things. And so for us, we might do a podcast series where we'll start having people during a certain heritage month. We'll have people from that heritage come and talk about their culture and their experience in our city. That way there's a raised level of empathy across the entire body. You know what I mean? We'll have worship in different languages. That way, now if I'm a Spanish speaker, I come in here and I hear my mother tongue, I feel dignified. And I think Jesus cared a lot about that. Even if you just look at the disciples, he brings people who are pro-state, anti-state, poor people, and a couple rich people all together at the same table. And something that I've been really chewing on recently is that I think there's two things that level the playing field. I think one is the cross. So you have one person on one side who's pretty much still trying to spit on Jesus, and he chose his path. You got another person on the other side who's man, and Jesus says, I'm gonna see you in eternity today. We're about to be in paradise. And so there's this leveling ground to the cross, but the other place in which I think there is level ground is a table. And so you can bring all different type of people around this table, and you're sitting at the same level. You're looking at each other eye to eye. You are tasting an empanada, which is not something that originated in Grants Pass or in Oregon, but that is very much so a different culture and from a different people and from a different type of love that was born into that food. And now we get to enjoy that together. And I think there's this dignifying power that comes through that, and it levels the playing field as you enter into a table. And now kinship can get pursued. And so when I think about Jesus sitting with prostitutes, tax collectors, all of the he's dignifying by leveling the playing field with the table before he even did it as he went to the cross. And so to me, that work is necessary, but we try to make it so spicy and so politicized and all this. And honestly, I think it's extremely immature when we try to bring our politics or our this and our that into that conversation, because it's just us giving a foretaste of what is to come in the new creation. And if I'm reading Scripture correctly, new creation is not all of us now just turning into Smurf-looking people and we're all the same. You know what I mean? There will still be every tongue, every tribe, every nation. There will still be diversity. And so if we can't recognize that now and practice it and foretaste it here, then you're going to struggle in eternity. You know what I mean? And so I don't know if I got to it, but I started to feel it in my gut, though.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I appreciate you, the bit of the preacher coming on. I mean, that is good. That is good. Talk to us about, now this justice work has been part of the DNA, you said of Bridgetown for a while. How does it play in the congregation? Do you feel like, what are some maybe misconceptions or misunderstandings or some challenges that folks might have to having a racial justice committee? It is true that in this day and age, it's just kind of part of living in our country right now, is that there are certain ministries of the church that easily get tagged as Republican or conservative, and some ministries that easily get tagged as, liberal, progressive, and I don't know. Interact with that a little bit.
Yeah,
Are you seeing any of these things at play at Bridgetown, and if so, what kind of conversations have you been able to have?
Yeah.
Riff on that a little bit.
No, it's great. Yeah. I mean, it'd be really easy for someone to look at Bridgetown and say, hey, they have a racial justice committee, like it's a woke church or whatever. And I just...
Are you a woke church?
I don't know what that means, but, I just, man, if in particular, like this is another election year, it's going to suck for all of us. Like, it's just going to suck.
Are we gonna? That's like the hash. What do you do? Tweet it?
Yeah,
that's like that's the phrase
tweet,
right
like,
there.
2024 will suck. I don't know. I don't know. But like, it's just, it don't matter how many pastors come out and say the right things or don't even try to play the political game. Like, the fabric of our country, there's a lot of division, there's a lot of hostility, and all of that. And so anytime people are trying to stir up that conversation, they're trying to sow seeds of hostility. And how I know I can overcome hostility is to meet it with hospitality. And so if you want to come at me, it'd be very easy for anyone in this country to write me, pastor of Justice and Mercy at a church in Portland, Oregon, as a black man, and do the whole, like, you woke, you don't care about Jesus, you are the devil, you know what I mean? And like...
Are you the devil?
I mean, I don't think. I mean, I know I'm aggressively handsome, but no. I'm playing. But I don't know. It's just, man, if you can't laugh, if you can't play, if you can't still pursue like hospitality, then we're missing the point, and we're not even having an actual conversation. And one of my things that I think God was so gracious to let me run alpha courses before I stepped into this role, because anyone could have these really serious questions. They have questions about sexuality, questions about race, questions about politics. Why does the Bible sanction mass murder in the Old Testament? All these crazy questions. And to be honest, they don't need me to answer that. They are trying to see, like, are you going to validate and hear me? And so I always tell all my teams, I said, honestly, the mission that we're on is to have smaller tongues and bigger ears. If you can have bigger ears than you do a tongue, like, you're probably going to look more like Jesus, right? I don't remember the exact numbers, but Jesus is asked in the Gospels, man, I'm going to butcher the numbers and I might have them flip, but you'll get the general idea. He's asked, I think, 300-something questions throughout the Gospels. He asked 150-something questions. He only directly answers less than 10, And in America, it's the opposite. It's like, I'm going to directly answer 150 things, and I'm only going to ask 7 thoughtful questions, And so I'm just like, what would it look like for us to have bigger ears than we do big tongues, especially in years like this, where there's going to be an election and there's going to be divisiveness. And now even your question that you originally asked, I think this is how it always should go. We don't actually need to talk about that so much, I don't think. It's more about, are we trying to enter into this conversation with the footing being about Jesus? If so, I think this is how he existed, so let's enter into the conversation that way. And like the last thing I told my team all the time, and it's funny, but this is just, I rather use language of like a barbershop or basketball court rather than an ivory tower. But I'm just like, man, be the one Christian someone meets who just doesn't suck. Like, you know what I mean? It's this political year right now. Why don't you just be the one Christian who doesn't post preposterous things online? And like, you just have nice ears and you just listen. And what if you give a couple hugs? You know what I mean? Like what would that do if more people just brought it back to the basics? And I think that's what I'm always trying to do in my ministries, is I'm not trying to always lead with Bridgetown and the Racial Justice Committee. like we don't really talk publicly so much about the Racial Justice Committee. That is happening almost in the engine, in the belly of our church just every day. And you're feeling the ramifications of the work. I don't need to put it on a pedestal all the time, you know?
You mentioned meeting hostility with hospitality. Do you have any concrete ways that that has looked, or maybe whether in interactions that you've had or ones that maybe people in your team or from the community groups? So either a couple anecdotes or maybe there's like one story about how that could look, especially given the climate of our time and how easy it is to return hostility with hostility. You have any examples for us or concrete recommendations of, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's so good, man. You know, I'm about to preach on the 10th at Bridgetown. It's my first time there, and honestly, I'm very scared. But one of the things that I'm going to talk about towards the end, the whole message is just about witness, right? It's just about witness or evangelism, if you want to call it that. And meeting hostility with hospitality is a part of that whole message. And ultimately, though, like, you can look at love almost through these three different phases, right? Like, there is spoken love, there's supernatural love, and there's sacrificial love. Now, to be honest, spoken love in this type of conversation that we're having in hostility might actually just be like not speaking. That actually might be more loving, is to not overspeak. Supernatural love, like, why don't we actually spend more time in an unseen place praying and asking that the Holy Spirit, who is a great counselor, would come and enter into all these conversations? And sacrificial love is, okay, I'm a donkey and you're an elephant. Why don't we actually share a table and, well, let's like actually just be on the same team as just people, right? And so how do you pursue hospitality? For us, the practice would be like once a month, like do hospitality with the aim of kinship. So AKA like invite someone into your home or go to their home or take someone to a meal or a coffee, whatever it is. And like, how do you just like actively pursue hospitality? And over time, you'll begin to talk about the things that you have in common more than the things that you have opposed. So we can talk about how the Blazers are horrible together. You know what I mean? Or we could talk about how the Ducks are always going to lose to Ohio State, always, from moving forward. I mean, like, and now it's just like, I can make the room laugh. And easily, this could come in here. I could be some black dude from Portland coming down and making the temperature hot, right? And like, yeah, I'm going to punch it to all these people in Grants Pass. Like, what does that do? You know, like, I want to laugh with people. I want to eat an empanada. And now maybe if you do have a conversation with me afterwards, like, I'm not an enemy and neither are you. Like, it's kinship, you know? And so hospitality looks like that.
So you're giving us an example right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're doing it.
Do you have any like good stories of, I mean, or maybe even some bad stories of like, hey, I tried to do it. I tried to meet hostility with hospitality, and it just didn't go well, or ones of what it did, you know. So I like the words that you're saying, and I think I can apply them to my life, but I just didn't know if you had any stories of.
Yeah, it's so good, man. Let me I can give two maybe. The first one's maybe bigger and grandiose and won't feel as applicable, but I think is helpful, and then I'll come up with a second one while I tell that one. And so long story short, I want to make sure I don't tell this too long, is when I was a college student in Hays, Kansas, western Kansas, town of like less than 30,000, so very applicable to Grants Pass, right? All white town, very Catholic, all these things. I went there to play football, even though I'm 5'7" on a good day. Didn't work out, boom, boom, boom. Fast forward, I'm in school, I just met Jesus, and as I'm in college for the first time in my life, like in a real way. And now one of these things happens in our culture, in our nation, where a police officer, at least through my interpretive lens, had done harm to an unarmed black person, okay? Now, I'm in Hays, Kansas. I have a professor. I'm studying organizational leadership. That professor says, hey, you should put on like a demonstration. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. How do you do that? You know what I mean? So now I'm putting on this like protest or this demonstration. All these people are around. Police are there. Reporters are there. They're like, oh, they're going to do something crazy. There's these massive trucks driving around. megaphones hanging out the window, screaming racial slurs and mean things, all this, right? I don't scream back at them. Boom, I've already met hospitality with hostility. Now, that stops, okay? Years go by. I go live in West Africa for a couple years, do the Peace Corps. I end up coming back to that town to be a youth pastor in the middle of Western Kansas again. And I'm just living my life. I'm serving the community. I'm trying to preach to kids. I'm just trying not to suck, right? And then ultimately one day I get an email from someone who's just like, hey, can I get coffee with you? And as a pastor, you always sit down with random people. It's just blind dates all the time. And so I'm like, yeah, sure. Sit down at the coffee shop, just like this. It was the worst coffee meeting I ever had in my life. It was so awkward. Nothing was being said, and I'm with this farmer guy, and I'm just sitting here, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And finally, after just excruciating pain, he looks at me and he says, Trey, I was in that truck. I was in that truck all those years ago, and I was saying things. But then I've watched you live over the past couple of years, and I've just seen the way you've interacted. I've seen the way you've traveled different places. I've seen the way you even taught kids. What's crazy is I think even at that time, his girlfriend and fiance was serving on my youth team. She was sitting under my leadership. And so he's like, I just needed to say I'm sorry. And I've talked to my family about this. I've talked to my friends about this. The way I view people who look like you has changed. And so all of it is not always necessarily about directly confronting that person. It's about, I have a standard which I believe is dictated by the way of Jesus Christ, and I just want to live like that. And if you can respect that, amazing. If you can't, amazing. I'm still just going to try to do this every single day. And so, the question is who's watching you? Because they are, right? And the next time you experience hostility, which you will, how are you responding? Because they're paying attention to that. And those are really concrete things that we can ask ourselves as we move forward. You know what I mean? And the little second one that I just am about to make up at the second, right, is hostility and hospitality. I would say this. Yeah. There's this organization called City Team in our city, and they're a rehab program, and so people will come in off the streets and in pure addiction and get rehabilitated for 2 years, it's a Christian-based program, all this. So our group will go and share, we'll go serve dinner there. I help out with City Team all the time. It's one of my favorite organizations in all of Portland. And I've had many a times where guests at those dinner tables are cussing me out, where my food at, bah, 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 you know what I mean, all these things. And then simply, I let them cuss me out, right? And then I bring them some water. And over time, now when I start to see them a couple months later, they're like, hey, amigo, how you doing? And now they're trying to give me a hug, and so it's a really simple thing. Hostility met with hospitality. Love will overcome darkness. Light overcomes darkness. That's just a biblical principle. So I don't know if that one was as good. I tried. I think it, but whatever.
I liked it. I do want to make some time right now for any questions. And if you don't have any questions, I do have some bonus questions. So there's no pressure here. But if you have a question, what you can do is just ask it. And then what I'll do is I'll repeat the question on the microphone just so make sure it gets on the recording. Again, in case somebody else has that question down the line and they'd like to hear Pastor Trey respond to that. But are there any questions out there right now?
Trey, you talked to me about proximity. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about proximity and how it's a gospel concept and what that looks like.
Yeah.
So the question is, talk about proximity, and you mentioned that word earlier in our conversation, and how it's a gospel concept and what that looks like.
Yeah, I'm actually shocked it hasn't come out of my mouth yet, to be honest. We've been talking about proximity this entire time.
You've said proximity and you've said kinship a couple of times, so
yeah,
it has come out of your mouth.
Yep. So I think proximity leads to kinship. So now what do they each mean? When I'm saying even for our community groups, right, every month I want you to go to this organization or this people group or whatever, this space. So you're physically making yourself proximate to the need. You're physically making yourself be near to the issue at hand. And so as you physically become close to houselessness, now houselessness is not just houselessness, it's Joseph from Santa Barbara who ended up in Portland. And he doesn't have no family left. And he lost a child once and then he spiraled. And now all of a sudden houselessness through proximity has become Joseph, who I want to empathize with and know, right?
And proximity, we might have proximity sensors on our car or on our houses. Proximity is closeness.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, that's so good. I like that. Yeah. And so now kinship then, like all that means is family, right? And I think sometimes we get confused. Like, I don't know about y'all, but like, me and Karma, we married. There's a family member and her siblings that I'm just like, I ain't really trying to be best friends. You know what I mean? Like, I love you, but you're not my best friend. Like, family doesn't equal best friend. It doesn't even always mean I agree. Like my own biological father, who I did not grow up with, is like, I don't always agree with you. But I've learned to love him, as I've got to know him, right? And so kinship is family. And what does it look like if, when Jesus says that, like, this is a new family, like through his blood, like, what does that actually mean? I think there's implications for how I should allow someone access to me and how I should give myself freely to them, right? And so, I mean, family is such a loaded word, but it's just more about, like, you are welcome to the table. I'm welcome to the table. You're welcome into this church. I'm welcome into this church. You can come to this event. I can come to this event. And we don't have to be best friends, but man, we actually might be surprised how we can get along. You know what I mean? And so proximity is what Jesus did. He goes, one of my favorite things in scripture is just like the overused passage just about talking about Jesus and the woman at the well. But he says, like, I must go through Samaria, right? And all the disciples are like, bro, you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. We don't do Samaria. And he's like, no, I must go through Samaria. And so I must become proximate to the Samaritans, even though me as a Jew, I don't get along with Samaritans. I must become proximate to a woman that everyone else wants to spit on in this town, but I want to drink from her vessel and call her clean. Like, I want to know her and I want her to walk away knowing she's known and that I know her name and her story. And then when she walks away, now she's built in dignity and she's going to go tell everyone about it, right? And so Jesus pursued proximity, and that led to kinship, And so I believe really strongly in those.
That's good. Next question.
And what's some of those partnerships look like?
Yeah.
Could you I'm going to butcher the repeating of the question. Can you do it?
I can do it.
Go.
Yeah, so the question was, have there been any times where I've ran into landmines as I'm pursuing relationships with organizations who maybe do not share similar values as our church does? Yes. Ran into those.
He just answered the question. Yes.
But so I think something unique that we do that I don't know if everyone would agree with, but this is how I feel led to lead my department, is every one of our official partnerships with an organization, we have everyone apply to be a partner every year. And so even if you're running the Hive, organization, and we've been in relationship for 10 years, every year I'm going to have you still reapply just like everybody else. And one thing that's done that's really helpful is, I don't know if y'all have been around a lot of nonprofits, but their leadership can shift frequently and drastically. And with a shift in leadership, when a new head coach comes, they usually will bring a new scheme sometimes. And so you have to be able to give yourself an honorable exit route. But also with that reapplying every single year, if our relationship is going really, really well, we can also have a time where we reassess how to go deeper. And so just like for an official capacity, there's a pretty much a time every single year we can reassess this relationship, and we can get in or we can get out, and they're very aware that conversation is on hand. And I think that's one way we can protect ourselves and the dignity of things that like we really feel that we are supposed to stick true to. Like orthodoxy in a city like Portland is not popular. And so we've decided that we'll stand on orthodoxy though. And so if an organization doesn't like that, that's okay. There's so many other partners for you. There's even other churches who will bend to things that you would like. And I don't need to figure that out for them or you. You can just partner, right? And so that's how we mitigate that in an official capacity. And to be honest, most of that has mitigated the rest of the landmines. Like throughout the year, like I haven't been in this role a super long time. And so thankfully, I wouldn't say I've had any like super active bomb threats. You know what I mean? Like it's been, I think people just know I respect them, and I ask them to do the same in return because I give respect, so I'm hoping they return it. But yeah, having a natural exit route, I think is wise,
Did that answer your question? He didn't really talk about any of the actual landmines, but maybe he hasn't.
Dignity, dog. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it sounds like most organizations you work with would align with your values in that official capacity.
Yeah.
Are there like other organizations in the city doing justice that you guys partner with that maybe don't share your values in certain ways? Like you have some of those unofficial partnerships?
No, that's great, man. Yeah, like.
So a follow-up question,
yeah.
Are there unofficial partners that maybe don't share your values? Because the wondering is, how do you partner with groups that don't share your values, especially in work of justice work?
Yeah, yep. And so I think you recapped the question kind of even well with that, so I won't. But there's a few things. I don't know if y'all have heard of like the Luis Palau Association in Portland. They do a lot of things where they bring together a whole bunch of different churches. So we'll have something called like Share PDX. And so different pastors who have a burden for evangelism will come together to try to do things in the city. There's, Pray PDX. Different pastors who are just burdened for prayer will come together. I'm on one called Serve PDX. So how do we bring the church, not just Bridgetown, together to serve our city? And so that's been a really cool way to have like associations almost within the city where we get to be a bigger bride, which I think is better, Now, in terms of like other unofficial things that maybe, like we would, of course, align with all that. But unofficial partnerships, I think those just happen sporadically and really naturally all the time. For example, I think the city of Portland, like the government entity of Portland and Bridgetown, do not align on a bunch, right? But I had this opportunity recently where I got to go into the mayor's office and pray with a person that's on that staff in their office and share a prophetic word of just encouragement over that person. And we got to walk away almost excited about how could we partner on something. And there's been a lot of those types of conversations. Our police chief is currently a Christian, but also I would say that the police in Portland maybe do a lot of things that we don't necessarily always love sometimes. Like there's some violence and there's different like rabbit holes you can go through. But we can keep main things. And I think it's just like I don't need them to become me and they don't need me to become them. It's at that point when we're just not really aligning on other things, like let's just not work on those things. Let's focus on this thing that we easily can agree on, and let's go deeper on that because that's beautiful. Like the city, the police, and my church don't want to see people with like naked on fentanyl throwing up on themselves, dying in the street. None of us want to see that. And so how do we help with that? Just that. And like the rest of it, we don't got to bring to the table right now. Let's talk about that person who's dying in the street, And so just keep the main thing. We ain't got to flirt with everything else, Yeah.
Next question. I think we got time for another one from the group.
I hope this is feeling helpful.
Yeah. Well, I got a few more. The first one is Are there any questions that you kind of wish we had asked you?
Oh man. I mean, thought y'all was gonna ask me, like what's my favorite football team or something, but no.
What's your favorite football team?
I mean, here I'll give y'all something embarrassing. When I was 18, I got a Carolina Panthers tattoo on my chest, and it's just such a deep regret. And it's so big that I can't really cover it. So if anyone wants to donate a tattoo cover-up, I'll take that. No, so do I wish anyone would have asked anything else? I don't know, man. This can all just go so many different places. Mm-hmm. What I might just say is I think it's unique, maybe, what could happen here in Grants Pass. And the reason I would say that is because, you can almost sense just how an environment feels when you walk into it. And as I sit in this room, I sense peace. And I sense people that are willing to open up their ears to listen to somebody else, even if maybe you might know more than I do or kind of more life experience or whatever, but you're still willing to listen. And I feel hospitality in this room. And so if we can feel that in this room with a stranger, then I'm assuming you could probably do that with your neighbors here in your own town. And I'm assuming maybe even different, I don't know if there's different churches, all that type of stuff represented here, different organizations, but I'm assuming you could probably even do that with each other if you can even just come together for something like this. And there's just so many ways to partner that does not have to lead to all the bull crap that everyone hates about the church today. It's just we don't have to do that stuff. And you just don't have to be a jerk. You know what I mean? It's okay to just collaborate. And I think, I'm in Portland, which is extremely progressive, which is extremely it's becoming almost post-Christian. You know what I mean? And so
Define the word post-Christian for us if we don't know that word.
That's good. When I think of London, when I think of other places, especially in Europe and stuff, post-Christian is there's so many people who have not been Christian for a long time now that when kids are brought up, they've never even heard the gospel. So it's so post-Christian that they actually aren't even hostile to the Christian church. They're just ignorant of the Christian church. It's not even a fight about they think I'm a horrible person. It's just they don't even know anything I believe. They've never even heard any of it. And so it's just post-Christian. It's like a clean slate. It's almost kind of refreshing, right? And so I think even in more rural areas, because of the internet and your TikToks and all that, all of our culture is still starting to blend more and more. And the idea of post-church, post-Christian is going to bleed from cities into everywhere. You know what I mean? And so it's just that's not scary in my mind. It's just almost like a nice little cleanse, and let's just re-engage. But what does happen with that is you are forced into collaboration or you die. Right? And so Bridgetown can't function on its own without support from other churches. We won't make it. Portland is a bigger ecosystem than Bridgetown is. And so it's just we have to collaborate. And so you might as well just get the jump on that and collaborate before that culture even seeps into your place. You know what I mean?
Thank you for that. What do you see ahead of you in 2024? What are some things you're looking forward to or working on right now, if there's anything that you can share?
Yeah. Work-wise, this isn't super public, and I know we're recorded, but I still would love prayer for it, so that's okay. But we just have some really significant work in partnership that's going to happen with some things in the Middle East. And I would just love prayer for that. And that doesn't sound specific, but that's okay. And in a couple weeks, I'm heading out to East Africa, and we have a couple partners in Rwanda and Uganda that we're working with. And for us, we're trying to just really limit maybe the 2 different areas around the world that we could focus on so we don't get too thin. But I think the Middle East and the East Africa bloc are probably them. And so there's some significant steps happening in this next year to solidify those. And to be honest, what I'm really praying for in Rwanda to bring back to my church is there's going to be a moment where I'm going to visit something called the Reconciliation Village. And Rwanda had, if you don't know, a horrific genocide. and that was within my lifetime. And so, that genocide happened, and, one ethnic tribe tried to eradicate another. And now, 20, 30 years later, there's people who were murderers killing people, and then people who literally received like their family members being killed, now living in the exact same village and actually saying like, I love you. And like they go to church together. And I just, there's this biblical pattern of reconciliation that might be the greatest example on the face of the planet right now that I'm aware of. And I'm pretty desperate for an elder in that community to just like lay their hands on me and pray. And what would it look like to like, I don't have a theology and I don't really want to fight about it, but what does it look like for someone to impart that ministry, that heart onto me? And how can I then bring that back and impart that into my people, in particular in a political year? Because if they can reconcile over genocide, we can reconcile over political stuff. And so that would be a major one, man. And I think we need to make some more decisions about, like I said, trimming good meat, not just fat, but we are too expansive in our attempt to pursue justice.
You have a lot on your website, and I was trying to figure out how are you stewarding, shepherding, all of that's incredible. Yeah,
you just empower people, But
yeah,
but we have to get a little bit more thin in that, and I don't want to be an inch deep and a mile wide. I want to have real deep roots with fewer things, so we can actually see an impact, and those stories can start to shape our culture at our church. Because culture shapes people faster than anything else in a church. So, yeah.
When we had our pre-interview, that's on YouTube, and if anyone wants to go back and check that out, you talk a bit more about your story, about meeting Jesus and being called into full-time ministry. You mentioned your Peace Corps time was in the Gambia. Are you going to get to go back there on your Africa trip?
Oh
or
man,
not this
I
time?
wish. It's so incredibly far away from where I'm going, because it's all the way in West Africa up here, and then you have East Africa all the way down here. So
Thank you for that, because my imagination
hard.
doesn't hold Africa together so well.
We're also like, let's just be honest, we're Americans and we suck at geography. We're pretty disrespectful to the rest of the planet. It's like, no, it's not Texas. Who cares? Like,
I don't even know the different parts of Texas. People say they're from Dallas, and I don't know where in Texas that
you're
is.
just what we call lost.
Well, I would like to end this time. Can I, on behalf of whoever wants to join me in spirit here, can I pray for you?
Please.
In these ways? Is there any? So you got your trip to the Mid-East, or you got some things in the Mid-East that's on the horizon.
Yeah.
You got the Africa trip. Is there anything else that you would like to invite prayer for?
I mean, I'm preaching, and just
that's right, on the 10th.
Would you pray for that? You know? To be honest, some of the themes we kind of covered today will probably be a part of some of that, but I've tried to opt for vulnerability is always helpful, and so. Yeah, what does it look like? Even in this conversation we've been having about just like culture and all these things, like what does it look like for me to bring my voice and my culture onto a platform and to be fully myself and to not try to perform to be something that I'm not? But the something that I'm not, I love and I deeply respect and has formed and shaped me, but I'm not that. And so how do I bring fully my voice to that is the prayer.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, if as you feel comfortable or led, I'm going to pray for Trey, and you're welcome to join me. So, Lord, I'm thankful for my brother Trey here. I'm thankful for the opportunity to get to hear what you've been doing in his life and how you've been leading him in his position at Bridgetown. I want to just you invite us to bring our cares and concerns before you. That's the kind of God you are. So I'll bring before you this stuff in the Mideast that is you know about and he knows about. And so we're going to come alongside and say, yes, would you lead and guide in that space? The trip to East Africa, we ask that you would lead and guide in that space on that trip, and that you would keep Trey curious and open to how you want to make that happen, how you're going to bring those different moments to bear on that trip, and for the opportunity to preach on the 10th would you lead and guide in that space, and that Tre's ears would be open to what you were saying and speaking, and that you would be the one who leads and guides his tongue, leads and guides his thoughts, and is already working in the crowd that they would be receptive to the word that you would like to bring. We thank you for this, again, this opportunity to hear from this particular thing happening in a particular place, and we get to benefit from that and be encouraged. And also for us, that you would lead and guide us, and how you might want us to take some of what we're hearing and mix it into our community, that we would know what to hang on to and what is okay to let go of for now. We need your wisdom on that, and we ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.